Welcome back to The Tangent. Today in the room we have Devin and Tim like normal. Harrison's not going to join us today. Myself, James. And today we have a very special-ish guest. If you want to call him special, would probably be the best way to do it because he does ride the short bus.
Wow.
We have Huck here. Yes, the infamous Huck. We have talked about him multiple times in the podcast. But finally, we have him here on cast. Say hi, Nick.
Hello, everyone.
Okay, so you guys don't get confused. I have a tendency to call him Nick. Everybody else calls him Huck. So if you hear me call him Nick, I apologize. That's just the way I've always called him.
Yeah.
Today we are going to do a cast on video game movies and why they all suck. Actually, I shouldn't say they all suck, because there are a couple that weren't too bad.
Some good ones.
For the times, there was a couple that did really good.
There's some that are so good that they're bad.
And you have a list?
I do. And by the way, you hit all the fire extinguishers, right?
Yeah, no fire extinguishers in the room today, because we don't need Nick shooting them.
Right.
So
I have the list up as well.
Are they listed by year?
So what they are is
I don't need to see.
Here on the Wikipedia, they have it listed by theatrical releases, television releases, and direct-to-video releases. So the theatrical releases seems to be the shortest list, but it's generally the ones that people are going to remember, and they do break them down in the order that they were released.
Okay, that's actually perfect. So let's go ahead and start at the oldest video game movie released in theaters. That would be the one.
So the oldest theatrical release on here is Super Mario Brothers.
Oh my god, did we really have to start with that pile of garbage?
This is what doomed video game movies.
Okay, so first things first. The main
start.
actor who played Mario had no idea what Mario was when he was cast for this movie. The only reason why he took it was because his son wanted him to be in it.
Yeah.
So he took it. He took it thinking that, okay, this could be interesting. And when he made the movie, because he had no idea what the premise of what Mario was, he acted his heart out because he thought that they were doing it right.
Yeah.
He didn't find out till later that it was all wrong.
So he overacted.
Yeah.
And the thing is, his performance is fine.
Right, there's nothing wrong. And the two actors, I forget his name, but he had, what was it, John Leguizamo was in it also?
John Leguizamo and the lead actor was, what, Hoskins? Bob Hoskins?
Yes, Bob Hoskins, that's his name. They were great actors. I think, personally, acting-wise, they picked good actors.
And honestly, everyone's performances in that movie, if you go over every single one of the performances, they all do fine.
Yeah.
The guy playing Koopa, his performance is way over the top, evil villain. You know, it was great. The chick playing Daisy is very stoic freedom fighter, and so for what they were all given, they all did fine. It's just the fact that they were given the wrong things to do, which is a problem.
You put in the
I
wrong
agree.
background, they were put in the wrong story base. I mean, it was just like, it didn't make sense for those who actually played the game.
And I think, to that same point, a lot of times why video game movies fail is because they get something wrong that deviates too far away from the original source material. You look at the Mushroom Kingdom, it looked nothing like that in any of the games.
Correct.
Or the main villain, for that matter. And, you take something that's near and dear to a lot of people, which I'm sure we'll elaborate more on this later, and don't get me wrong, you had like the Bomb Bombs, what else did they have?
Did they have bullet bills?
Yeah, they have bullet bills. But the jump shoes, it's like, really?
Yeah, he had to have shoes to jump, and he had a full mechanized suit of armor or something that made him become Super Mario.
But the city was fungus.
Right, because it's the Mushroom Kingdom. See, that's the whole thing. Is we talked about this off cast of video game logic versus movie logic, and a lot of times when movie execs get handed a video game property, they switch everything over to movie logic because they're afraid that their audience won't pick up or understand video game logic.
Right.
So they change stuff over, and it's a lot of the times to the detriment because your source material is completely divergent from the style in which you're trying to adapt it into.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we all agree that Mario was a big pile of garbage, because if we could probably sit and talk 20 minutes on like how much of a pile of garbage it was. I want to get into a couple other movies, and then we can kind of sum it up a lot of the logic behind it that Nick started towards the end. So we'll go ahead and move to the next movie.
The next movie was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid, and it is total garbage, and I love it to death. Double Dragon.
Never saw it.
Oh my gosh! See, and that's just
I
it.
don't think
Is
I've seen any
Nick
of
and I
these.
were talking about this the other night. He had never seen Double Dragon. He didn't even know it was turned into a movie.
I watched
Yeah, you remember their handshake?
Yeah.
With the it was like fist bump plus high five at the same time.
I do remember the cartoon series, and I love the cartoon.
Oh, the cartoon series for Double Dragon was great.
I only have vague recollections of the movie Double Dragon. I can only see vague.
It was Billy and Jimmy. They were of different races, but they were brothers.
Right.
And that Asian lady was raising them their whole lives, and it was like a post-apocalyptic, city. And the city was being run by that business guy in his suit, and he wanted their Double Dragon so that he could gain shadow powers, and it was honestly. I'm not sure how close it actually is to the video game, but it is a very similar premise to, I would say, the TV show. Because the TV show, the main bad guy, he had shadow powers.
Shadow.
Yeah, he was the shadow. He was the Shadow King or whatever the hell it was.
Well, that was very close to the premise of the game, because you were battling to get.
The only thing I remember about the
beat him.
game is Billy's girlfriend is kidnapped.
So how close was it to the original source material?
Well, Billy didn't have a girlfriend who got kidnapped, so
That was like the premise for every single game.
Yeah,
There
that's
wasn't- and that's the thing.
That's the opening scene. That's the entire premise of the game to begin with.
I mean, some games we all can agree don't really have enough source material to really go off of.
And I talk about that too,
comparisons.
because video game logic versus movie logic breaks down a lot to engagement. A video game can engage you a lot more easily because you're actively participating. So they don't need a whole lot of setup. They don't need a whole lot of story.
Yeah, you don't need a reason to
like-
walk through a level and destroy everything on the level. It's just fun.
Seriously, Double Dragon starts out and, lady standing in front of a garage, bunch of bad guys walk up, punch her in the stomach and drag her away. And that's all you need to go, I'm going to go kick the crap out of these guys. And the garage door opens and you come out and you go kick the crap out of those guys. Done.
They don't really have to lead you the same way because you're already following along.
Right.
Right. And in movies, they have to catch you. So you got to have, no different than music or whatever. You have to have a hook. You have something that's going to hook you in, pull you towards the plot, make you follow the plot, get to the climax, and then
if they had wanted to stay more in line with the first game, what they could have done is they could have backed up a bit and done like 15, 20 minutes of like backstory of like Billy and Jimmy and the way they grew up, and Billy meeting this girl and falling in love and becoming a couple.
I mean,
and then something happens where like she gets in trouble with this gang of dudes and they come and kidnap her, and Billy and Jimmy like see
like
them and
The
they're
Crow.
just like, oh no, and then it becomes a giant
they
chase
could have
movie.
done an awesome
Right,
montage.
that's an easy way to take that premise. All you have to do is expand upon the backstory a bit, and you're done. You can just go.
Yeah,
Right.
all they needed was a few minute montage of them training to learn to get to where they're at. Maybe even small story about how they got their double dragons,
Right.
and then him meeting the girl getting kidnapped, and now it's like the whole story is going to be him fighting to get.
But
His
if
girlfriend back.
you guys haven't seen the Double Dragon movie, it is cheesy and terrible, and it is fun as hell. Because like honestly, they're like one of the bad guys they keep running into, the Abobo. Remember Abobo?
Yeah.
Bobo.
Okay, so Abobo was the name of one of the bad guys from the video game. He was just big, bulky, strong dude, right?
Right.
Well, in the movie, they had this big, bulky, strong dude, and they wanted to make him bigger and bulkier and stronger, so they inject him with a bunch of stuff, and he ends up becoming this, like, weird monster man. And he didn't know what he looked like until, like, late in the game. And at that point, you know, he looks in the mirror and he's like, "What did they do to me?" And he, you know, a bunch of stuff happens, and it was interesting because they take some of these weird premises from the game and they introduce them into the movie in a sort of dramatic way. And honestly, as cheesy and bad as it was, it's a fun movie to watch. If that's all you're expecting.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you know going in it's cheesy, I mean, most people can get through that.
That's
And-
kind of touches on something I always think about is as a kid, we go into watching movies with less expectations.
Right.
Well-
And the thing is that actually works a lot to the next two movies on the list,
Go in with the next two movies.
Yeah.
We'll
Which
do
is-
them both at the same time.
which is Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat.
Street
Okay,
Fighter.
so let's break that down because Mortal Kombat, I have a lot to say about the Mortal Kombat movie. But let's start with the Street Fighter movie. There are people I know that love that movie because of the cheese.
Yeah.
I mean, you got Jean-Claude Van Damme as freaking Guile.
Right.
Who's the main character for some reason.
Yeah, for some reason he's the main character, but in the game itself, it really doesn't. There is no main character.
It's Ryu.
I mean, the game kind of did a good balancing act. Tim, you mentioned it earlier, video game logic versus movie logic, and I feel like they tried as much as they could to merge the two. As if I remember correctly, originally it was just a tournament, right?
Yeah.
In the game for Street Fighter.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same. It's the same basic premise as a lot of the fighting games, like Tekken, where for some reason there's a fighting tournament to determine the future of the world.
Okay, but there's not much source material
Right.
there
No,
to work
there's-
with.
Well,
Yeah,
I mean, it's the same.
backstory,
Okay, so it's
honestly.
the same for like Mortal Kombat, Tekken,
Soul Calibur.
Soul Calibur,
Yes.
Street Fighter, all them. Basically, it's a tournament. The game
Well,
logic is
the
it's a
Soul,
tournament.
the Soul Calibur games are less tournaments and more just like duels on the way to a thing. But
Okay.
it's
Well,
the
yeah,
same,
they
yeah.
are now.
But like, so Mortal Kombat, they were fighting to save the world from being taken over by Khan to become part of the underworld,
The
or
Nether
whatever.
Realm.
The Underrealm, or whatever the hell they called it. But Street Fighter was literally just a tournament of Street Fighters that let's see who's the best in the world. The movie did not have that
if
premise.
I remember correctly, it was a tournament to see who they were going to go send to stop M. Bison, who was trying to take over the world.
Yeah.
That might have been what it was. And then Tekken, I don't remember the story behind Tekken. I just know that
the story of Tekken is the Mishimas. Hayachi Mishima owns a big company called what is it?
that's the
Tek-
dude that wore the wood shoes.
Mishima
The
Zaibatsu.
Mishima Zaibatsu, yeah.
So
He's the one that wore the wood shoes and did the.
and he's got the
The crazy hair.
Yeah,
double spike
okay,
hair.
yeah.
Yeah. So he's the main bad guy of
The first one.
well, he's the main bad guy of several of the first games. But the whole premise is he runs this big company, and him and his son don't get along, but they both know the same style of fighting. So to kind of like mock his son or like egg him on, he's like, I will run this tournament, and the winner of the tournament, it becomes the owner of the company. And this was supposed to be his, his whole like, you can't run this company, you're just, my stupid offspring.
Yeah, he threw his son in a volcano.
Yes. And at the end, it was a fight, but it ended up being a fight between the two of them. Hayachi wins, and he throws his son in the volcano.
Yeah, and then like later doesn't.
No, wait. But doesn't he win the first one?
Kazuya wins
Because
the first
Kazuya
one.
wins the first one, loses the second tournament, which they run again for some reason, and then Hayachi throws him in the volcano. Third one, Kazuya wasn't in for a while, right? They
kind of played it off that he died.
Right, and then
Until the
the
fourth
devil comes in, but was it Kazuya's son shows up, or Kazuya's
Son
Jin?
Jin shows up.
Yeah, so-
and then Hiachi shoots him. Yeah, it was a really weird.
It's
weird
it's a
cheesy
No,
story.
they
it's a
actually-
strange set of circumstances that really doesn't come around to stop being just a fighting tournament until what 6? Like six
more-
is the first time where it's not just a tournament; it becomes this weird war between the Mishimas.
Really, it's just a fighting tournament game of Family Feud. I feel like.
Yeah,
Well, okay. So back to like Street Fighter, real quick. The movie itself is pure cheese, absolutely pure cheese. Like people like it because of that. Me
people
personally,
like it. People like it because M. Bison's lines are immensely usable as memes.
True.
Like Of course.
Well, and, okay, let's use these games we've talked about. They're all bad, okay, in terms of having a lot of source material to work with.
Mortal Kombat was probably the first
we'll
one to
get
start.
to- we'll get to
really
Mortal
using
Kombat
Right,
it.
we'll get to
here
that in
in
a
a
second, but and I'm going to bring this up a lot. A lot of times when you play a game nowadays, a lot of the older games we're talking about, they didn't have much in the way of story. Nowadays, story,
It's a whole different, yeah.
video storytelling in video games as a medium has increased over the years. You know, you look at a game like Metal Gear Solid that's really story and character driven, and
And that's a thing in video
Fleshing
games
out
that
the characters.
I have a problem with sometimes when a lot of people say like this video game is very cinematic. And I was like, well, that's not what I play video games for. I play video games to play.
Well,
yeah,
yeah.
and we've used The Last of Us on multiple occasions as an example of that said genre.
Right, which is again the reason why I can't play Last of Us, because it's not really a game. It's basically like a television series for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's more of a choose your own adventure.
A television series that the second
Telltale,
season went way downhill.
more like-
Okay, so we all understand that Street Fighter is either good or bad depending on what you're looking for. Go into the movie not expecting much. Don't be impressed in the movie. Just go in there thinking this is going to be interesting.
If
and just
you're
laugh.
if you're going in there expecting Street Fighter, you're not going to get it. If you're going in there expecting cheesy action schlock, well, guess what you got? You got a big old pile of cheesy action schlock.
But on the opposite end of the spectrum, we also have Mortal Kombat, and one of the fights in that movie
Okay.
sticks
Yeah.
out to me.
So now we're going to get into Mortal Kombat. Now, Mortal Kombat to me was actually one of the greatest adaptations into a movie from a video game. Because the premise of the video game is very easily turned into a movie.
Agreed.
So they were able to pull it together. Now, some of the actors in there were not very good martial artists. I'm not going to make any comments on who that was, but it was this blonde chick that they just put in there for looks and she couldn't fight for crap.
Imagine that.
Don't remember her name, but it was not one of my favorite. She was not one of my favorite actors at all. But they did bring two actors that were very good at martial arts that were very not well known at the time. The guy who played Johnny Cage and the guy who played Liu Kang. Great martial artists.
There's one more though. Let's also say, for sanity's sake, and I know you're going to talk about it, and I've said it, the guy who played Reptile too. He was very
Well, the
No,
thing
no,
is,
because
the
all,
guy
all
who
those, all
played
those are
Reptile,
stunt guys.
the
All
guy
the
who
stunt
played
guys know how to
Reptile
fight.
was
Right.
actually just one of the choreographers dressed up so that they knew the choreography was going to be correct. Which
Yeah.
is why that fight scene, which we'll get to that fight scene in a second, was as good as it was. Now, there are great fight scenes in that movie. Very well put together, very well choreographed, and very well done. Like,
And what's funny is some of them even use video game logic, like finding your boss's weakness,
right, correct.
right? Which isn't even a thing in fighting games.
Well, if Johnny Cage, I mean, he kind of goes out of his way.
No, I was thinking more Sub-Zero,
Right.
Okay.
right?
When
So
Liu Kang fights-
you find the boss's weakness, which isn't even a thing in fighting games, but it's good video game logic, and it was something they introduced into the movie, and it actually works out really well.
Right, because when you're fighting a boss in a video game, what's the first thing you do? Find his pattern,
Find a pattern, and then exploit
figure
it.
and exploit it. Well, that's exactly what Liu Kang did when fighting Sub-Zero. Is he found a pattern, found a weakness, and exploited it. Now, the two big fight scenes I want to talk about. Now, Tim, you have a third one that you enjoyed, but we'll talk about that one in a second. But the Scorpion Johnny Cage fight. Now, the Scorpion Johnny Cage fight had a lot of video game aspect to it because of what Scorpion is.
Yeah.
So he has the grappling that comes out of his hand, which I never realized came out of his hand, but the video or the movie made it come out of his hand, made it freaking cool and creepy as hell.
Yeah, it did.
Because that's perfect. That's a good way to adapt that grapple, to movie. I mean, because, dude, who would ever thought this weird thing that has a mouth comes out of his hand? That's creepy as hell and cool as shit. So that, and then they start in the gumball or the gum tree forest, and then they end up in basically in Scorpion's realm of fire and platforms, and then they end up fighting. That fight scene itself, the fighting was okay, but just the way the whole thing played out was very well done.
I agree.
It reminded me of the game.
Right.
It reminds me of Scorpion's level.
Although I would have much rather. Okay, and that's one area I think in the whole movie where they only deviated. Where I, myself at the time being a huge MK fan as a kid, I would have much rather seen Scorpion and Sub-Zero fight each other, because in the movies and the comic books.
But you got to understand is they did give a reason why they didn't fight each other, because they were fighting for for the.
Yeah. And the thing is, because that makes a lot of sense, because when it comes to tournament time, there's no use for them fighting each other because it's one realm versus another,
right?
And they're on one realm side. And
but
so why would they fight each other when they're trying to preserve?
But yes, the premise behind Sub-Zero and Scorpion is they're mortal enemies, and he says that these two are mortal enemies, but I have them under my control, so they now fight for me. So. And then the second one, which we won't get into right now, but the second one, then Sub-Zero on that is out for revenge because it's the original Sub-Zero's brother. But now the second fight scene you alluded to a minute ago from Mortal Kombat is the Liu Kang reptile fight.
I love that fight.
Now, pure fight dynamics, that still rates in one of my top 5 best fight scenes in a movie.
It was really well done.
I mean, does it hold up now? No, because the choreography nowadays is a lot better. I've seen better fight scenes, and I've seen better fight scenes with and without wires. So it's like...
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen, Ong Bak or The Protector or any of the Tony Jaa movies.
Tony Jaa, or even, I mean, truthfully, if you really even go to some of the, what's his name? The guy who plays Ip Man.
God, I can't remember his name right now.
I can't think of his name either.
But he was in what was it, Flashpoint, and he was in Rogue One even.
You're right. He is very good at what he does, and in the Ip Man movies,
yes,
those fight scenes just between him and the other kung fu style masters are amazing.
Well, honestly, my favorite movie by him is probably still Flashpoint, which is a very gritty, realistic, where he focuses on grappling and boxing and using his environment, and he tackles people a lot, and he puts people in holds, and it's very gritty and realistic, and it's a really good movie, but
anyway, back to Mortal Kombat. Those are my 2 favorite fight scenes. I think the Reptile Liu Kang fight is still ranked in one of my top 5. But Tim, you said you really enjoyed the Johnny Cage Goro fight.
Yeah, it's very sort of it's gimmicky. It's using a lot of video game logic. It's following, like, I'm at a huge disadvantage against this big dude. I need to figure out my how to get out of this. I need to use my brain instead of using just action schlock to try and figure out a way to outsmart this dumb beast with 4 arms. And basically, it and the Sub-Zero fight are roughly similar in that manner. They're using more video game logic than movie logic, and if you can translate video game logic into a movie, and it works out really well for video game movies, because that's kind of what your audience is expecting. They're expecting something that engages them on that level instead of on a movie level.
Right, and that's where I feel like a lot of people say, "Oh, video game movies are bad. They're bad."
Right.
But if you look at
they're taking something that's supposed to engage you on one level and changing it to the way that movies are meant to engage you, and they don't translate well. They don't translate into that sort of realm in a proper way.
Let's move on to the next couple movies. Give me a list of the next couple movies, and we'll talk about the ones that are even
worth it.
So, Wing Commander,
I never saw it.
Lara Croft Tomb Raider, and Resident Evil.
Okay, so Resident Evil's a really good one to talk about, and that one we can talk about for a while. But we'll talk about the Tomb Raider movies. And I'm going to do multiple movies, and we're going to talk about both sets. So, the Angelina Jolie, the 2 movies that Angelina Jolie did, I think were hot garbage.
Yeah.
I think Angelina Jolie's hot garbage.
Well, we're not going to go there and actually put it directly on her, but I think they just tried to push too much of this run around, jump, and parkour, and fight, and shoot guns, and all that other stuff that was a big part of Tomb Raider, but they just tried to force it too much.
They emphasized moving the game, like the game mechanics, into a movie, and not really the gameplay into the movie, because a lot of the gameplay was running around and exploring your levels and things, and she's not doing that. She's running from point A to point B.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of puzzle
that's really all
solving.
she's doing.
There wasn't a whole lot of puzzle solving, which there's a lot to do in
Right.
Tomb Raider.
There wasn't
and
a lot of
of
tomb raiding.
excess exploring. But exploring in a video game sometimes can get boring, because I'm sorry, I'll spend 45 minutes to an hour exploring an area to try to make sure I find everything. Is that going to entertain the 3 of you? Watching me explore an area?
Yeah.
No.
It could.
Marshall watches me play video games where I'm not doing anything for like an hour.
Look
But-
at Skyrim. You can go out and explore a beautiful cavern or the geography for over an hour, and it can be really exciting.
Sometimes the
not, though.
tedious
Not exciting. Maybe exciting to
the
the player.
yeah.
Is what I'm getting at. It's exciting to the player, not exciting to
The
the
audience.
spectator.
And that's
Which
what,
is
that's what I'm
where-
talking about. Different
right.
levels of engagement. A video game engages you more easily because you're doing it.
Right, and
A
that's
movie,
where I was
a movie
getting
has
at.
to do other things to engage you. So like that's a lot of the reasons why they'll take action games, even if they have a big exploratory element, and they'll change it to pure action movies,
That fails.
because that way you can have more shooting and more explosions and more things that engage your average movie audience.
And that's what I'm getting
But
at.
it completely transforms the game.
For instance, well, Tomb Raider and Skyrim, exploring in those games for the player is like exciting,
Yeah.
but in exploring for somebody else is not. I mean, it's no different than them trying to explore in a movie. They're only going to get so much excitement and enjoyment out of it, and they're going to have to cut that scene short.
See, if they were to do like a Skyrim movie,
Oh, God.
they would have to run it kind of like a Lord of the Rings style lore fest, sort of very low on action, heavy on lore and high fantasy.
And the thing with the Skyrim, running a Skyrim movie, is they'd have to run a linear freaking timeline to make
yes,
sure
it would
everything
basically be main quest only,
right.
and cut down a lot of the action beats and,
I mean,
and
you
stuff
can
like that
throw in
to
nods.
explore more of the lore and things that are going on in the background and
Right.
Could I
execute
make
more
a good-
story.
could
But the
I
thing
make-
is, I don't think it would work out terribly well.
I don't either.
Could I make a good Skyrim movie? Probably. Why? It would be more. It would be something that would appeal to more of the players. So I would throw in small little Easter eggs of some of the side quests
Right.
to make it like somebody like Nick, who's played the game extensively, be like, "Oh my god, that was cool! Oh my god, that's pretty cool too."
Little Easter eggs, yes, that make you appreciate it. We were talking about all these movies, and I'm just going to add this real quick. All the ones that we've talked about for the most part so far, in my opinion, I think they failed because there wasn't much there in terms of character development from a video game standpoint or from a plot standpoint. Really, there wasn't much to it. It wasn't complicated, it wasn't deep enough.
But here's the thing. One of the movies that I just listed didn't fail. It made an entire franchise somehow, and it's Resident Evil.
I was
Okay.
going to get there.
I want to talk about that.
Now, I will say, in terms of being a video game movie, a lot of video game fans hate those movies, but they turned them into pure action movies, and they ended up being very successful to the movie-going market.
Yeah, because moviegoers will go and watch Resident Evil having never ever played a game and never really cared to.
Right.
Correct. Now, don't get me wrong. Some of the later movies in the Resident Evil franchise aren't as good.
It gets hokier.
It does get very hokey towards the end. But the first, two were very well put together and very, horror genre-esque
Yeah.
style zombie type thing, which made it perfect for what it was because it was an action horror.
Yeah.
Like, you have your main character who doesn't, go through the first one. The main character, she doesn't remember being part of the Umbrella Corps, but she was.
Yeah.
And she's going through these office buildings like, I don't even know what this is. What is this doing in my house? Where am I at? What's going on? And then also these zombies
Honestly,
show up.
the first one,
The
the first one,
horror in the first movie was spectacular, along with the action.
the first one felt less like Resident Evil to me and felt more like Silent Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Well, I think if you look at and I'm gonna talk for a minute. Coming
Oh
from a
shit!
guy
Everybody get comfy.
who's played every single Resident Evil game, I kind of have this theory that, the first few games, they were genuinely horrifying. The third one was focused more on action with Nemesis.
Yeah.
The fourth one, fifth one, sixth one was all action, which I attribute to the movies. But there was a really good story in there. And I have to give, from a video game logic standpoint, the Resident Evil movies props for the first couple, because they kind of showed and displayed all of that lore that was there. They kept the characters close to what they were in the game, which as a video game player, and Tim, we talked about this last night and the night before, a lot of times some of us will project ourselves onto our characters, or we'll look at how, with some more modern games as opposed to some of the older ones we've talked about, that you like the characters because of the way they are, their personality, their traits. You see how they interact, and how they feel about certain things, or they might crack a joke, and you learn to really like some of the players when you play games because of their personality, right? I really feel like Resident Evil did a good job with that at first.
Yeah.
But then, as it started getting further and further out and further in the movies, don't get me wrong, I love seeing Nemesis on the big screen, but some of it, like with Jill, just went so over the top which I love that character in the game, but in the movies, it was just a bastardized version of her, and Wesker. They went way too far away from the source material, and I didn't like it.
They didn't do much with Jill after the second movie until she showed back up 5 movies later or something.
Well, she was in one of the movies right after, but
she was in 2, and she was in 6.
She wasn't a prominent member of the party. She was just there shooting stuff.
Right, and that was one thing that I really was mad that they took away from her in, I think it was the second movie where they fight Nemesis, was they took away the fact that she's the one that beat Nemesis.
Right.
And so I thought that was really disappointing.
Well,
but either way,
but
as a video game movie, for some reason, Resident Evil succeeded. Yes, it started out as a video game movie, but then it became its own franchise.
It translated well into being just action schlock.
Yeah, it did, and as a franchise, you have the video game franchise of Resident Evil and the movie franchise of Resident Evil, and they really did a large split.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The series went back to horror, which I kind of liked, but sometimes it doesn't translate well to a movie.
Well, I also wasn't a big fan of the way they changed the video game side of it from a horror genre style where you are scrounging for ammo and barely had weapons to defend yourself in the first couple games. Jump scares all over the place.
I love that.
I spent so many hours watching
to a
my
run
brother
and
play
gunner
the first
like you
2
have in
games.
5 and 6. Because 5 and 6 are just a basic run and gun game.
Yeah.
You have a shit ton of ammo, you can go through and blow your way through levels, and you just run and gun. Now, I wasn't a big fan of when they changed that.
5 and 6 are horror games, like Gears of War is a horror game.
But
Right.
7 and 8...
It might have scary moments, but it is basically made to be shot through.
They
7 was
did make a
horrifying.
couple of good ones after that, where they kind of went back to that, but I think the first action style, not shooter style, that the first couple games were way better than.
But there's a movie on this list that we have ignored so far, and it's Wing Commander.
Never seen.
I've never seen it. I didn't even realize that they made a movie for Wing Commander. But
I don't even know.
We might have to go. We might have to do a side quest here and
yeah, I mean,
and watch Wing Commander just to see how bad it is.
I'm not sure there's
Commander.
actually a movie game combination on this list of which I've hit both
So
or you've played the game and watched the
Yeah,
movie.
but honestly, for most of these games, I probably haven't even played them.
this list is getting
Well-
actually surprisingly really close to what I view as sort of like the modern day.
Yeah, I was say
Oh,
around Resident
right.
Evil, you start to get a little more modern.
Yeah,
But
you know,
there
so
was
give us like
there
three
was
or
there was
four more.
the House of the Dead movie, which was awful.
Yeah.
Alone in the Dark, which I've never seen, and Doom. Right. So
Do
Doom.
we need to get into Doom?
No, we really don't.
There was only one good scene in the Doom movie, and that's when they went in the first person.
But
and that was about it.
you know what movie makes Doom seem like a great spectacle of filmmaking? The next movie on the list, Blood Rain.
They made a Blood Rain movie.
They made a Blood Rain movie, and the guy
Yes!
who made
Yes, they
it,
did.
Uwe Boll, he made a lot of video game movies, and his whole thing about making video game movies was, I make these to make money. I don't make them to make video game movies. I don't care about the source material. It doesn't matter. I'm
They
just
did
trying.
make a Blood Rain movie.
Uwe Boll actually continued to make movies for a really, really long time because of where he filmed his movies. They had this weird thing where, like, he could write it off to the government, and it didn't matter if the movie made money or not. He would make money because of the big tax credits they would get.
Oh Jesus!
I
I do remember
So that was
Blood Rain, but I don't remember the
basically
movie.
his strategy. So if I'm looking at how much money
Correct.
Blood Rain made as a movie, it made $3 million, which is like nothing.
right.
Probably cost more than that to make.
Right, but
Yeah.
it didn't matter because he made money off of all the tax credits and junk.
Right. So list the next couple. We'll kind of go through them one by one. If we find one we want to talk about, we'll talk about it.
Silent Hill, love that movie.
It was a good movie.
Dead or Alive, and Postal.
Dead or Alive or Postal. I've never seen either.
Postal
one.
is a very violent game that's basically
Postal is that game that I was excited they were going to make a movie for it, and I forgot they put it out.
Aw.
Like, I never actually went back and watched it. Like, it seemed like one of those things that was like, yeah, this is going to translate into just nothing but action schlock just fine.
Right.
And I'm sure it did okay. And apparently made a fair amount of money. It made $146 million.
There you go.
But the Dead or Alive movie made under $8 million.
Oof.
Silent Hill made almost $100 million.
Silent
That's
Hill
right,
did
by the
very
way.
well.
Silent Hill was, in my opinion, a very very well
But-
put together movie.
Silent Hill as a video game turned into a movie could be very well be done. It's just no different.
It's
For
just a horror movie at that point.
For
That's
me,
what the
yeah,
hell the game was.
But for me,
Yeah.
it'd be no different than turning
Translate
The
into
Last
the
of
pro-
Us into a movie.
Yeah.
But let me ask you a question. If they made a Last of Us movie, would you want them to follow the source material to a T like they had in the
the
video
thing is,
game?
I don't think that they should make a movie. I think it would be much better as like an 8 or 10 episode television show.
Yeah.
I wouldn't even worry about
I
that.
think a
But,
lot of
my
things would be
point, my
better as
point
an
that I'm
8
trying to get
episode
about
television show.
The Last of Us is The Last of Us is basically a movie in itself. They will never make a movie out of it because they want you to play the game. The only way to get the story behind it is by playing the game. So they're not going to put it in a movie so people don't have to play the game.
But you got a lot there within the world of the game itself that you could probably make a movie on, or an anime or a TV show into an offshoot.
If you wanted to do side stuff, yeah, that not
Yeah.
not running the main character, yeah, maybe.
But I mean, I really feel like that ground
But
has
at
been
that
retreaded
point-
so many
At
times.
that point, you might as well just call it The Walking Dead and walk away from it.
Right, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah. So after Postal, we start getting into some interesting things that are more like what you and me, Huck, were talking about yesterday. Hitman.
Good movie.
So the first
Okay.
Hitman movie.
Okay.
In the Name of the King, a dungeon siege tale.
Never seen it.
Far Cry.
They made a Far Cry movie.
They made a Far Cry movie. I've never watched it. I've seen the DVD
So-
of it.
Let's go back to Hitman real quick because we extensively talked about Hitman 2 nights ago.
Yeah. So the first Hitman movie with Timothy Olyphant and what's her name that ended up being also in the Max Payne movie.
You got enough
I-
source material there where you can easily translate
The
that.
and
Yeah,
and-
because
Yeah.
the source material for
movie.
Hitman is very easy to move around, and because all it is he's an assassin who comes from a group of people that are all basically similar to each other. They took out the fact that they were all clones of each other. They just made them all highly trained dudes in a like sort of monastery type deal.
Right.
But so that's really all it is.
Well, yeah, he's good at disguising himself. He's good at hiding. He's good at infiltrating, and he's good at assassinating. But that in itself, as a movie premise,
Yeah.
not just a video game premise, actually could work out in any. It doesn't even have to use the Hitman
Right.
characters.
Right.
That as a premise for a movie has actually been done a couple different times, because there's a movie called The Saint with Val Kilmer in it, where he basically turns himself into a man in disguise, and he steals things, and he's an assassin. He does what he has to do to make money. But that's no different in premise than, Hitman. So, I mean, yes, the Hitman as a premise could be done either or, and they did a good job of transferring that premise into a movie. So, yes, that's one of the very rarity movies that you'll hear us say was actually a good movie.
Yeah. In the Name of the King, I've heard good things about, but I've never actually watched it.
I've never heard of the game.
The game is Dungeon Siege.
Don't know it.
I don't know that much about the game, but I've heard good things about the movie. Far Cry, never watched it. I have no idea which game it's even based off of. It came out in 2008, so I don't know how many of the Far Cry games were out at the time.
One or the
08?
first one or two.
There was at least 2 or 3 by then. 2 by then.
Yeah. So I have no idea which game they took the story from, or if
Yeah.
they did, or if they made a whole new
So
story.
we've
because
never seen
all the Far Cry games don't really key off of each other,
No.
as far as I
No.
can tell.
Not until recently, no.
Well, and those two Far Cries only got together and did what they did because they wanted to. Basically, they wanted to make a little extra money off of the Far Cry 5.
Because as far as I
And they
remember,
just did
the
a quick
first
extension with a
the
couple
first
of
the
side
first Far
characters.
Cry game where you had like beast powers or something, and they didn't
I
keep
thought that was
anything near
Primal.
that. Maybe it was.
It was
I
an
don't know.
add-on
There-
or
there-
expansion for the
dude,
first one.
There are so many freaking Far Cry games, and all of them are so disparate from each other. I mean, there's one where you're in like 80s neon hell, like it's
Right.
Oh, that was amazing, though. There was like so many.
was it like Neon Dragon or some such crap?
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing about Far Cry is
Some
each
such
Far Cry
crap,
game is
like
based in
what-
a different area with a different like set of like engagements to get you through a story.
Yeah,
And the stories are all different. Like Far Cry 5 is about a
you're a different character on a different island with a different set of abilities, and you're running around doing.
It's about a drug dealing. I'd say they're drug dealing, like very cult like group that takes over a small area. And
The first one was about a guy who got stranded on an island, and they were doing weird experiments. Second one, I couldn't play because it was an unplayable mess of garbage. It was so glitchy. Third one, I think, was the most popular one.
wasn't that Primal?
That was the first one. The third one had Vass, as they call them, I believe, or Boss. And it was about a group of kids
I
that
don't
went
think
out on
Primal
vacation.
was the first one though, Nick. What I'm saying is there was Far Cry 2, and Far Cry 3, and then they came out with this game called Far Cry Primal. It's its own game.
Right, it was an add-on for the first game.
Is it just an extension of the first game?
Yeah, basically it gives you the ability to turn into a, like...
But it was its own standalone game.
No, it merged with the first game, so you could play the first game with it. Because on the first game, like, it was just this big open world that had stealth. You could either go stealth or guns blazing.
That's the way they still are.
But I think the third one, they started really putting a heavier emphasis on the story. You know, a group of college kids go out for a vacation, and then they realize, you know, they're in over their head with a major cartel that kidnaps them and all of their friends, and they got to save them.
All right. So, we have next. I'm going to skip the Street Fighter Legend of Chun-Li movie because that's worth skipping. Max Payne, Tekken, and the Prince of Persia movie.
Okay,
All
so the Max Payne movie I never saw. The Prince of
The
Persia
Max
movie
Payne
I
movie-
saw, but I don't remember. I
The,
remember
the, Ma-
watching
the Max
it,
Payne
don't
movie
remember
I
anything about
watched.
it.
I was working at the movie theater when it came out. overall, as a movie, I think it works fine. It is not really anything like the video game. They have the same characters, basically, and the core story is sort of the same. But, like, they change a lot of things, again, from video game logic to movie logic. And I don't think it was as detrimental to Max Payne as it could have been, but the only people who really watched it were the people who liked the Max Payne video games, and they ended up complaining about it because as a result of moving it from video game logic to movie logic, they changed a lot of sort of the background of the story. So they didn't like how it didn't stay close to the source material. It basically wasn't that close to the source material. It was basically its own entity, and I thought it was, as a movie, okay.
At that point, if you deviate too far from the source material,
it's in name only at that point. Really, it's just it's the same characters in a completely different world.
It's just marketing at that point with the name.
So the Tekken movie, I don't think I've ever seen. Was that an actual live action movie,
Yes, it was.
or was
This is the live action Tekken movie.
It's terrible.
I didn't know they even made a live
I
action.
forgot
I've seen
about
some of
that.
seen some of the anime.
The only things that I remember about
The anime stuff's
the
good.
live action Tekken movie is Lateef Crowder is in it. He plays Eddie Gordo, and the God, you remember? I think it was the Protector, the really big muscle bound bald guy.
Yeah, the white guy.
Yeah, he's in the Tekken movie. I think it's playing Marduk.
He's done a lot of movies where they use his size and muscle mass for.
And Hayachi is played by the guy who played Shang Tsung.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
That makes sense. He's a good martial artist in his own right.
Yeah, I've seen him in stuff as a martial artist. I've seen him in a lot of things. Honestly, he plays all sorts of different stuff.
So, but anyway, so the movie after Tekken was
Prince of Persia.
Prince of Persia.
It was not a very good movie in my opinion. It had
I never played the game. So
it had
going
what was
into-
it Jake
Jake
Gyllenhaal
Gyllenhaal.
and the chick who played like the fairy chick in no, she played like the Muse in the remake of Clash of the Titans.
I
So,
liked it.
If you remember Clash of the Titans, how it had
Yeah.
the two women. One of them was Alexandra Dalavos or whatever her name is, and she was the one that was captured. And when they went on their journey, they had that sort of spirit, fae type lady who accompanied them. She's the main chick in Prince of Persia. I can't ever remember her name.
Gotcha.
I thought that they did a pretty good job. And again, you know, talking about this, I've kind of learned that you got to have enough source material to stand on your own today, whereas before I thought a lot of times it wasn't exactly staying close to it. But I thought Prince of Persia movie, and I watched it with my wife Katie, who by the way was on this podcast.
We know who Katie is.
You don't have to plug your wife.
I just had to mention her.
Well, I mean,
But I thought it did a really
depends
good
on
job.
what its goals are.
I thought it was they did a really good job of staying close to the video game and the characters in itself, and it was really well done and well put
They
together.
almost made it into like an action comedy, which I don't think was terribly appropriate for it.
Really, you think so?
Yeah. So I'm going to skip over because they do more Resident Evil movies. The second Silent Hill movie. I mean, we basically went over a lot of that.
Right.
But then they got into Need for Speed, Hitman Agent 47, which I am going to mention because it is not a sequel to the Timothy Olyphant
Right.
Hitman movie. It is.
Well,
it is a
okay.
is a reboot of.
So let's touch on Need for Speed real quick because James is a race car.
I never saw the movie.
Is a race car game fanatic. And when they said they were going to release this movie called Need for Speed, I'm like, oh great, it's going to be another Fast and the Furious, it's going to be hot garbage.
So was it another Fast and Furious that was hot garbage?
It was worse than Fast and the Furious, and it was more than hot garbage. It was hot garbage lit on fire with gasoline.
Going
So
down
it
the
was-
highway.
It was a hot dumpster fire.
Yes.
I didn't
So-
even know they made a Need for Speed.
They did, and it
Uh,
was not done very well. It was... they tried to portray the Need for Speed Underground stuff.
Mhm.
You remember, we all love the Need for Speed Underground. I know at least the three of us do.
Yeah.
So was
Carbon,
it
Underground.
almost trying to be like an underground racing ring? So like almost Tokyo Driftish.
Correct.
Yeah.
So the thing is that he was supposed to get in this tournament, and then he had a car, and then it was stolen from him. So he ended up stealing another car to race in this. It was so dumb and out there and stupid that I don't even know if I'd want to watch it again.
See,
And I love race movies, and I love cars, and I love that kind of stuff, but I
I'm
could
not
not
sure
watch
if
that
the
one.
video game story
yeah, Need
stuff
for Speed doesn't really have a whole lot of story to draw upon.
It's always like you
Well-
start with a badass car gets destroyed, totaled, stolen,
I want to know who
impounded.
abducted by
And-
aliens.
well, and
whatever.
truthfully-
Then you're
if
driving
you
a
really-
Mazda Miata with like cheap bumpers,
right?
you know.
And truthfully, if you really go back to some of the older Need for Speed games like Underground or Carbon or Undercover, those actually had stories in them.
They did.
That wasn't just you racing. Even in
Carbon had a
Carbon had a good story.
Club Midnight had a really good one.
Even if you sorry, I got sidetracked because Nick did something silly. But anyway,
Damn, Huck.
I don't even know where my train of thought was going right there.
I don't either.
Oh, the
but-
newer games. The two newer games. Payback and Heat. They actually have a story built into the game, but they did something in the newer games that they didn't do in the other games, which they made it a little more open world for you to drive around. I remember Undercover was open world,
Yeah.
and Carbon was partially open world.
Somewhat, yeah. Like you had
Undercover was completely open world.
Undercover is completely open world, but
don't
Carbon's
remember
like
Carbon was.
is like halfway. Like you
Carbon
can only
was.
you
And
can
then,
only drive to
um,
like where you're going.
Underground 2 was open world also.
Yeah.
Well, Underground 2 was not open world, and I believe Carbon was one of the first games to be full open world, wasn't it?
Underground 2, like
2
you
was
had
open
to
world.
drive to like your races,
races.
and stuff.
And the thing about
On the
Underground,
PlayStation 2?
yeah, and the thing about Underground 2 was
It was
there was a lot of
really
cops
good.
out. It was a lot of avoiding cops and keeping from getting heat and
Not in number 2. That you're thinking Hot Pursuit.
I was gonna say I thought that sounds
Yeah,
more like Hot
you're right.
Pursuit.
You're right.
But
and
Number
Underground
2, there wasn't cops.
there was
No, there
cops.
wasn't.
Yeah, there was.
Sure, there were cops. They
You
gotta
know-
chase you. But okay, but after Need for Speed is where I think we start getting into the very, very modern realm of
Where it's
video game movies, which I think is where they're
super
starting
easy.
to figure out how to make video game movies.
They're doing a lot better. Yeah.
So the next three are. But now I'm not saying these three in particular were successful, but they took really big steps to start making successful video game movies. And it's Hitman Agent 47, Warcraft, and Assassin's Creed.
yeah. I
So,
was wondering about
the-
Assassin's Creed.
The thing is, Assassin's Creed I don't think was a very good movie.
I
Why?
agree.
I don't think they translated everything correctly.
I
Okay,
agree.
I didn't watch it, but I did play a lot of the Assassin's Creed games.
Right.
How close did they stay to the original source material?
Pretty, but the thing is, it's a matter of they took the wrong parts of the video game and translated them into the movie. I don't think they did it quite right, but at least they were kind of exploring things. And I think that it was a big jump in how to make a video game movie. I
Now
just don't
the-
think they did it right, but they were exploring it.
Who was
The
the main
war-
character? Like, which...
It was based off of the first set of games, I believe.
Yeah.
So, but Hitman Agent 47 out of these three, I think, was the good one.
Warcraft was not a great movie.
Well,
It's
wasn't
the
that
one out of the
great.
three that made the most money, but that's, in my opinion, it doesn't say whether or not it's good.
Fan.
It was a fan bump is what
Yeah,
pushed
yeah,
Warcraft.
support.
But Hitman Agent 47 was, I think, a really good video game movie because instead of being a video game movie, they just took the premise of the video game, stuck it in the background where it's happening in the background, and they focused on a completely different set of characters and made a movie around them, and then Agent 47 shows up and basically interrupts the movie and goes, "I'm kicking down your door, and here comes my video game," and and it sort of transforms everything and gives sort of like an extra layer because they're alluding to things that are happening with Agent 47, but he hasn't shown up, and he doesn't show up till like halfway through the movie.
What?
But he's doing stuff.
I gotta watch this.
Yeah, so he's doing stuff. You like see him in the background on occasion, or they'll talk about things that he's doing, or they're pursuing him, or he's pursuing them. But you don't really see him. He doesn't actually show up and become a character until like halfway through the movie. And he shows up and he goes, "I'm the bad guy," and he starts doing stuff, and then everyone goes, "Oh wait, you're not the bad guy. He's the bad guy." And then there's shit that happens, and it was actually really well put together, sort of like
What
almost
year?
thriller type movie.
What year was that, and how close are we getting?
2015.
Okay, so
Yeah,
we're getting
we're
real
getting-
close to modern stuff.
So after those three
I mean,
movies,
that
we
would
get
be
into
modern.
Tomb Raider, the new Tomb Raider.
Which we sat and watched on Friday. I had tried to watch it a couple times. I'm going to say this, but I need to preface why. Every time I tried to sit and start watching this movie, I'd fall asleep. Not because the movie was boring, it's because every time I had a chance to sit and start watching it, I was already exhausted, so I would just fall asleep during the movie.
So we watched Tomb Raider on Friday. I think it gets a lot of flack, but it is a very good movie that at the end, I think, for me, falls down because it uses movie logic instead of video game logic.
I disagree on that.
To me. You can't disagree with to me.
You can't
You dick.
disagree
Oh,
with an
Right,
opinion.
I didn't.
You
So,
just have
I
your
okay.
own.
understand why you think that though, and I don't disagree with.
Okay,
But
so-
I think
Beyond the video game logic, TV and the movie logic, stuff like that.
but I still
They did
want it. I still want them to make a sequel, and apparently they are. It's apparently supposed to be coming out here not too long.
So the movie itself was well put together. They put enough puzzling and enough exploring and enough side stuff. Especially the fact that I like the fact that they showed Lara Croft before the Lara Croft that we
Yeah,
know.
they did that thing that we talked about earlier that they could have done for the Double Dragon movie.
Right, they put
They
backstory
pushed
into Lara
back
Croft.
from the beginning of the video game, gave you backstory on how she came up, why she's in where she is, and they make you attach to the character, and then they start the game, and they just sort of go.
Right.
I kind of like what they.
And it's
did
just
with
sort of
it.
action from there.
Although,
So they had a nice build, which was great because they put the movie side of things. They put a nice build to the plot. They got you into the plot,
Especially at the beginning of the movie where they do that bike race.
Yes.
That could have just been useless time suck. But I thought it was really interesting to show like her ingenuity and why she is where she is and what kind of motivations she has. It was a well put together scene that didn't necessarily need to be there, but it did actually benefit the movie by being
Yes.
there.
Go ahead, Nick.
they did a really good job of staying close to how the character itself is portrayed in the games, and the most recent one. And I really like how they threw in Easter eggs too. Little references to some of the newer Tomb Raider games, with the pickaxe and everything.
Yeah.
So the next couple of movies, Tomb Raider was a good movie. I thought the newer version of the Tomb Raiders, outside of the Angelina Jolie movies, we'll just kind of leave those on a different page.
The next two are basically the last ones in a sort of weird style set, because the last two movies on this list, I think, are completely different in terms of how they are video game movies. But we got Rampage and Dead Trigger. I don't know
Never
anything
saw
about Dead Trigger. I didn't know there was a movie or a video game. I have no idea even what it is.
Just a generic mobile zombie shoot 'em up.
Okay.
and Rampage,
So we can basically just ignore that. But Rampage was
Old
The Rock
school-
movie.
yeah, it was the
Yeah.
Rock movie, but the game itself was just an old arcade cabinet game where
Yeah.
you punched buildings and ate people and
Right.
Right, and they basically turned into like a King Kong versus Godzilla style style
Well,
movie with
yeah,
the Rock.
Rock crashes a helicopter.
Yeah, I mean, they just
Rock
turned that movie
blockbuster.
into kaboom explosions and break things and things blow up and people run around.
But the last two movies on this list are Detective Pikachu and Sonic the Hedgehog.
Okay, so this is where we're going to start talking quite a bit and finally get to hear some stuff from Devin, because I personally think that Detective Pikachu was a very well done movie.
I love Detective Pikachu a lot.
I have not played the game, so I can't speak based on
here's the thing.
how close it is to source material. But
I didn't really care about the game Detective Pikachu.
Yeah,
because that wasn't really what mattered. It was more like exploring the Pokemon world.
Yeah, for the first time
in real life and like how everything interacts. And
I think they did probably.
I think they used a lot of
try at bringing something like this, because not a video game, but we talked about Dragon Ball Evolution in every episode so far.
Yeah.
But like that shows you that it can be done right if you have enough respect and actually think about how you want to show and portray this kind of franchise.
Right, which is
on
what
the screen.
I want to get at, because Detective Pikachu to me showed that with the right
this is what like Mario could have been.
evolution and like digital
Right.
make the God, I can't think of the word, cinematic
Yeah.
advances that we've had. Detective Pikachu was able to be done in a flawless manner.
Yeah, like I said, the only thing that I know about the Detective Pikachu game that's accurate to the movie is that the Pikachu's addicted to coffee, and that he's a detective.
Well, and the fact that you throw Ryan Reynolds in as Pikachu's
it kind of
That's
made
a bonus.
it. Yeah,
is
that's
absolute
a huge
bonus. That was one of my favorite parts, is listening to him talk. But,
and then it ties together perfectly at the end of when the story is finished. I'm not going to spoil it, because actually I've been thinking about, I didn't really have a lot of participation in this one. My recommendation, I'm just going to spit it out now, is watch Detective Pikachu.
I'm going to watch that tonight.
It's really
Detective Pikachu. Okay, now you are the only one, I think, that's actually seen Sonic.
Yes.
Probably.
Because I have not seen it yet. I've wanted to, because I've heard it was really good. Now, I heard, at first people were giving it so much crap because of how Sonic was done.
And then they changed it.
Then they changed him. They actually took... They did something that most movies have never done, is they took the criticism from the crowd and fixed it before they released
We
the movie.
cyberbullied a bunch of movie producers and people into making it look better.
So
Right. Go ahead and say your thing about Sonic.
So, looking at Sonic, you didn't have much source material there, but there was enough that was never explored in the games. That you had a lot that you could elaborate on. And one thing I love about Sonic is they did just that. Like, you ever wonder why Robotnik is the way he is? Well, they gave that a backstory, which I thought was really neat. But the best thing about it is, one, they stayed very, very, just like you mentioned with Detective Pikachu. They kept the character very like how he's portrayed. Okay. They kept him in character.
Mm-hmm.
And they took the plot and they did really good with it. And I think anybody from a kid to an adult could enjoy that movie. I mean, it was really well done. And like you mentioned earlier, I'm going to agree with you, James. The special effects really helped to get that.
Right, and that's the special effects from nowadays is nothing compared to what they used to be. Now, if you take some of those movies that we've talked about that are hot garbage, we'll throw Mario in the mix. I think if we made a Mario movie now and tried to keep it close to the source material, it would turn out a lot better.
I think we talked about this. Tim said it is. They're figuring it out, and I think they figured it out through other things kind of being put into a movie platform that weren't original movie sources. Like, you see how much fan servicing and Easter egging and all this stuff are in movies now, and it all kind of started with, like, superhero and comic book movies and stuff like that. And now, when they're doing comic book movies and video game movies, they're throwing in more Easter eggs. Like, you could watch a Detective Pikachu 100 times, once every day for 100 days, and you will still be finding Pokemon that you didn't notice before.
Really?
Yeah.
They just
Pay really close attention to
over
the backgrounds.
place, and all of them look awesome. Like, they didn't make it super corny, super cheesy. You can tell that when they were making it, they knew that they would be crucified and burned alive like witches in the freaking 1400s if they didn't do this crap.
Well, and the thing about the
Right,
Pokemon
and they did a
in
really good
Detective
job.
Pikachu was, it's all CG. So
Yeah.
there's no rando dude in a costume or
Right.
or animatronics.
And they also...
So they were able to make the Pokemon very fluid.
Yeah.
So like they were the way they move is the way you would expect one of these Pokemon
And another
to move.
advantage that I think, like games like Mario and Sonic and Pikachu, that if like making them now, they have this advantage of there's so many different kinds of titles underneath that franchise. You know that there's different types of games that they've made for Pokemon and Mario and Sonic even, that you don't really have to be like, oh, I'm about to watch a Sonic movie. I wonder what kind of game that they're going to base this off of. They can do their own thing because they've already established that they've done it in their games.
Yeah.
So can we agree to one thing? One, we've talked about a lot of different movies today, okay? And I think one of the reasons why Detective Pikachu did so well and why Sonic did so well is because you had a lot of source material there to work with. Now, if you go back and you look at everything, we'll exclude Resident Evil.
Well, the thing
because
is,
there's
it's
enough
not even
there
it's not even really source material, because Detective Pikachu doesn't use a whole lot of its source material. It just sort of uses a premise and creates a story out of it. There's not a whole lot of deep Poke lore in Detective Pikachu.
No,
No,
but you've got the
because-
characters though, and you've got established traits on how they act, right? I mean, I haven't
Again,
seen
the
movie.
advantage
Well, no,
is...
because
like,
there aren't
they
any
also know-
reoccurring characters from Detective Pikachu in the Detective Pikachu movie.
Yeah, the Easter eggs are all done with Pokemon themselves mostly,
Right.
and just things that they talk about in the story. Like Mewtwo's a big part of the story, and there's a lot of Easter eggs towards like the original story in the first animated movie, Pokemon the movie.
Really?
You know, so like there's cool fan servicing and Easter eggs without actual source material being brought right out and smacking you in the face, because they know that the people that are paying money to go to the theater and watch these movies or buying the DVD or whatever, they know all this stuff.
Right.
So like
The thing
we
is,
kind of
like,
just have to
Detective-
nod to
Detective
them and be
Pikachu-
like, hey, you like this, don't you? This is awesome. This is cool. And
Right.
we're like,
Detective
hell yeah.
Detective Pikachu doesn't have a whole lot of established Pokemon lore. What it does do is it creates new Pokemon lore.
Yeah.
The only real Pokemon lore thing that I think they did was that bodyguard chick and how she always wore sunglasses because she's a Ditto. Mm-hmm. And if you took off the sunglasses, you would see her Ditto eyes, which is a thing only from the anime.
Right.
Before that. Like in the video games, they established that Dittos, when they transform into a Pokemon, they look exactly like a
that
Pokemon.
I'm not
But
a
in the
Pokemon
anime,
guy.
Yeah, in the anime, they don't look exactly like you.
Yeah,
can
they
tell
have
it's
the Ditto
It's
eyes.
a fakey
But what I should have said is, when I said source material Pokemon lore, I meant that there was a very established universe with lots of Pokemon in it that you could use.
Yeah,
for
and they
the-
paid attention to the what's already been
Right,
established.
and that was
instead of,
actually
like,
that's actually a benefit for Detective Pikachu, because it has this giant universe, and all you have to do is go, we're in this universe, drop you in. All you have to do is just sort of have like basic outlying rules that
Yeah,
you
'cause-
don't break,
and they
and you
kind
can
of-
run anything you want through the center of this giant circle.
They kind of shattered a glass ceiling with the movie too, because not only is it the first live action Pokemon movie, they didn't try and just like remake one of the games where, you know, you got like a 10-year-old going through and fighting gym badges and stuff. They were like, here's what life would be if Pokemon existed
Right.
for just a normal.
It's not
And that's
about a Pokemon trainer. It's about basically normal people living in the Pokemon world.
Yeah, there's a whole city where Pokemon and
I mean, your main
people just
character,
live
your
together like they're
main
both
characters
citizens.
in Detective Pikachu are a failed insurance salesman and a journalist.
Yeah, like an yeah.
Like
those aren't characters from the game.
Right.
Right.
So we can sit and talk about Detective Pikachu for a while. It's a great movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It doesn't matter if you're a Poke fanatic or
It doesn't matter if you're
doesn't
a
matter
kid or
any
an
of that.
adult.
It's a
good.
spectacular movie, and if you have children that are even remotely into Pokemon, they will love it. If you have children that aren't into Pokemon, they will get into Pokemon a little bit more by watching this movie. Great movie.
Yeah.
I do want to take a step in a direction that we didn't talk about, because we talked about mainstream movies, like turn into live action or
So this was the live action section. We didn't
Right.
extend out of the live action
there
section.
are plenty of other sections of video games turn into animes, TV shows, blah blah blah, that we didn't get
Or
into,
vice versa.
or vice versa, that I'm not going to get into because
Right. I mean, we
that
could
bury us into
go
a
over
hole.
the theatrically released animated movies, because it's only like 5 or 4 movies it looks like, and one of them I didn't even know that they released
Final
something.
Fantasy VII Advent Children,
No, that never got a theatrical release here.
and then the Final Fantasy movie,
The Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within,
The Spirits Within.
Ratchet and Clank apparently got
Oh, yeah,
a
I
theatrical
remember
release,
that.
which I didn't even know was a movie.
I didn't see it, but I remember it coming out.
These were really good.
And the Angry Birds movies.
Right?
That counts.
I watched them with my dog.
They
She
are
loved
they
it.
are video game
That
movies
is probably
that
still pretty
got
enjoyable.
released in theaters.
It is.
I mean, I didn't like Angry Birds the game to begin with, so I didn't watch the
I didn't watch
movies.
it. I'll admit, I played Angry Birds
is so
for a while.
addicting. You remember Flappy
But I mean,
Bird too?
there's
Oh my
there's
God.
other TV shows, like they actually did the Super Mario animated.
It was good.
It was really good. I really enjoyed
Cheesy. It was
it.
good.
There was some other stuff that they animated from video games in the animated series and stuff like that, but we're not going to go into it. So, really, I think what we can get out of all of this is that early on in this whole process of making movies out of video games, they just tried too hard to make action movies out of.
They didn't try to actually find a way to put this video game platform into a movie type deal, because like earlier examples, it was just a bunch of like people that didn't really care about the source material, or it was a lot of like people that didn't know about the source material and kind of just took a role
And you
for
can
whatever.
Or there
kind
wasn't
of by
enough.
taking
Or
that,
there wasn't enough.
you can
there
kind
to
of tell.
go for 'em,
You can
know?
kind of tell that the first set of movies was definitely done by people who never played video games.
Yeah.
And then as they got older, as the video gamers got older and were able to make the movies, they were actually able to make the movies closer to.
Yeah, at the beginning it seems like it was just people that got delegated the task of making a movie about this platform, and then they did what they could with it.
Yeah.
And then towards the end you got people that wanted to do this and wanted to put the work into making sure that it was going to be something else.
Well, I think too. Okay, and I know I'm going to be a little biased here, but let's go back to use Metal Gear, because I love to refer to Hideo Kojima.
Everybody
As
has their
the film industry has evolved with video game movies, I think he was one of the great pioneers in using... 'cause games can be movies too, okay, to a certain extent. And if you have a really rich story, I think some of the greatest things that make a good video game movies, if you have a good story, a lot of a universe to expand upon. Look at Final Fantasy, the Final Fantasy movies. I think Advent Children, I did watch that, and I thought there was a lot there to work with.
I mean, there's a lot of lore sitting in the background of Final Fantasy VII. Our RPGs and stuff are just filled with lore that you could expand upon in a movie. That's easy.
You got the characters. I think in order to have a successful movie, wouldn't you agree that, like, we all love our characters. Some of us project ourselves onto them, some of us don't. You got to kind of stay close to that. And if there's a lot,
Well, I mean,
there to
I
work
went
with,
over that yesterday. The two main ways that I think people play
Talk about
games, which is either you are your avatar or you are next to your avatar.
right?
Which is basically like when people make their avatar in a game or they play their avatar in a game, that they project themselves as being that person versus like projecting yourself as being like either Overwatch or part of the team or just like an assistant to this character that you're basically telling them what to do.
You can kind of tell the way somebody's playing by the type of character they play. Like,
well, it can also depend on like video games because
yeah,
real time strategy games are almost exclusively you are Overwatch.
Yeah,
you are
the
commander.
commander. Yeah,
Right.
So I mean that's sort of easy to tell. But there are games that are much more focused, like you are sort of in it, like the Mass Effect games or Batman, where it's harder to project yourself as sort of being Overwatch. You're more I am the avatar. But there are games, and there are people who either like playing those games or they don't like playing those games, and a lot of that will have to do with the style of how they use their avatar
Or
how they project themselves with their avatar,
or how they're presented to the player. Yeah.
Right.
All right. So, with all that said, we've said a lot today.
I do actually have one more thing.
What's up?
So there's here on the list of the Wikipedia page for live action movie interpretations of video games are a list of movies that are coming out that actually have release dates.
Really?
Yes.
And I was just gonna run down them and see which ones excite everyone in the room more than the others.
All right.
So January 15th, 2021, there was going to be a Mortal Kombat movie. In March of 2021, they're doing a sequel to Tomb Raider. I'm really excited about that.
I am
to see
kind of excited about that because the way the first one ended, it really needs a sequel.
Yeah. In April of 2021, there's going to be a Monster Hunter movie, which
I'm not
Like
surprised.
a
I'm really surprised about that.
I'm not.
July of 2021, an Uncharted movie.
Ooh, that could be
I knew
interesting.
about that.
Because Uncharted basically is a movie.
Yeah.
So,
That
Well,
could
that's
be interesting
you
because
guys made a lot of comments about The Last of Us, but Uncharted is basically the same
Yeah.
thing.
But the thing is, it could be really interesting because Uncharted is just
but-
Uncharted
Here's-
is just Laura Croft is.
Going to the untitled ones too.
no, there's like 50 of them.
Well,
And because they don't have dates, it's completely unconfirmed as whether or not they're even going to be made. I mean, if you look at some of those titles, there's no way that some of that's going to get
Can
made.
I
There-
pick a couple?
there's Just Dance. They're not going to make that into a movie.
I think an entitled Borderlands movie would actually.
But here's one that I think is actually really, really interesting. March 2022, Minecraft.
oh god.
Oh goodness.
I don't know what the hell they're going to do with that, but I'm kind of excited to see. And I mean, the fact that it has a date attached to it, like it's coming out that day.
You might as well just start getting excited for
I
it
mean,
because that could be
but-
a huge train wreck.
But
which is
the month right after that, April 2022, Sonic the Hedgehog 2,
Yes.
already announced.
Well, we already knew that
Yeah.
because Jim Carrey confirmed that
Right.
after the huge success of the first Sonic the Hedgehog.
But yeah, if we go into some of the, I'm gonna call it unconfirmed video game movies, Borderlands, Crossfire, Detective Pikachu sequel,
That-
Five Nights
okay.
at Freddy's, I think could be an interesting movie.
Ooh, definitely.
It could be hard.
And it could also be
Yeah.
extremely terrible.
Yes. Just
Because if they end up just like the majority of the movie is just him wandering around like a city trying to like go to libraries and stuff to try and figure out why are these things moving around, which honestly I've seen way too many supposedly horror movies that end up doing that crap, and I was like, dude, that's not scary, that's not why I'm here. I'm
You're
not
in
here
the
to
library
I'm not here to watch
drinking
you I'm not here to
coffee.
watch you study, all right?
Yeah. This isn't exciting at all.
But Gears of War, I really doubt they're going to make that into a movie.
It's not going to happen. I don't know why that's still
But
on there.
Just Cause, maybe. Just Dance, not going to be a thing. That's not going to happen.
You'd be surprised.
Why not, man? They made Save the Last Dance. They made Step
It'll
Up.
probably
they
be
made...
nothing about like anything source material on it. Just
They're all just going to be stomping on
Who
arrows.
in Hollywood looks at some of these games and says, I'm going to make a movie into that? I mean, come on, guys.
But Mega Man, I don't see that being a live action movie.
Yeah, it probably would.
Metal Gear Solid, I could see that as a live action movie, but I don't know.
Depending.
Space Invaders. Like a lot of this, like people just put this crap up here. Like there's no way.
It is Wikipedia.
The thing is, though, is what you got to understand is there's probably, and I'm not going to lie,
SimCity and The Sims are on here. I mean,
there was probably a full script out there for every single one of those movies.
Oh, definitely. There's probably multiple for a lot of these.
I've been following it.
And like they're only putting those as probable because somebody saw the script for that movie and is like, oh my god, so they're gonna make a movie out of it.
But most of these I guarantee are not in production and probably not going to ever be in production.
Metal Gear is supposed to go to production next year.
That's one of the ones I said might happen. But I mean, Space Invaders and Saints Row and SimCity. No, that's.
I just think that I hate to do this to you, Nick, but if they build a Metal Gear Solid movie, you are just going to be disappointed.
Now, if they do it into an anime, which they're talking about doing,
well, this is the live action section. We didn't even head to the animated section, which is huge. Once we get into like the Japanese international releases, this section is huge. But
yeah,
I mean, I really feel like some animes can do a much better job of doing a video game type universe. I mean, look at Castlevania or Pokemon. It's pretty much set the stage for that, right? Castlevania, I don't know, have any of you seen that?
Bits and pieces of it.
It does a really good job of staying close to everything and telling a good story.
So, I'm going to run around the room real quick because we're getting kind of long here. We need to look at recommendations. Devin already threw out a recommendation.
Yeah.
He said to go watch Detective Pikachu. Any recommendations on a movie to go see that was one of the movies that maybe we talked about?
I'm gonna say go watch Tomb Raider. It was a good movie.
I'm okay with that.
Go watch Sonic the Hedgehog. You'll like it.
Okay. Mine is, if you really want to get in nostalgic, go rewatch the freaking Mortal Kombat movie. The first one. Forget the other ones even exist. Go back and rewatch it. But don't watch it for the story or anything like that because it's super cheese. Because, yes, I just rewatched it and it's pretty much garbage. But just kind of look at the fight scenes and the choreography behind it and just kind of realize that when that movie was made. So
anyway, you could also go back and watch the Double Dragon movie. It's cheesy and crappy and fun. But I mean, don't expect a whole lot out of it. It's just
right. All right. So with that, we're gonna say thanks to Nick for showing up today.
Thanks for having me.
And taking all our crap that we've given you over the last couple months over our podcast.
He didn't even shoot a fire extinguisher.
No shooting of fire extinguishers.
But I did sneak in Dragon Ball Evolution.
We did sneak in the Dragon Ball Evolution plug. Okay. Anyway, so with that, I will talk at you later.
Peace.